Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
Okay, we're going to move right into chapter 9 as we finished up chapter 8 last week, talking about the vision of the ram and the he-goat and the little horn that Daniel was confused about initially. And the interpretation of the vision and the ram's identity and the goat's identity and all of those things. We talked about that last week. And in chapter 9, we'll see here that there's another vision. Daniel's having visions, God is revealing to Daniel, I should say, a lot of things here. And, in chapter 9, chapter 9 deals with Daniel's prayer for his people, and towards the end, the 70 weeks, which we probably won't get to tonight, but we'll get as far as we can. First verse, chapter 9. This is Daniel's prayer for his people. He's praying to God here. The people are in a bad way at this point. They're sinning against God, and the people of Israel are just forgotten or abandoned the laws of Moses and their God. So verse 1 says, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of Median descent, who was made king over the kingdom of Chaldeans, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah, the prophet, for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Now, right off the bat, he tells you about the 70 years, but he's not going to get into the 70 years actually till later on in the chapter. But let's start with this. The date at the start of this chapter. You see here it says in the first year of Darius's reign, right? It's important in terms of when certain events took place later on, right? As events start taking place. It's the first year of Darius's reign. This is 538 BC. He was a little confused because he understood the visions of the 4 beasts and the ram and the he-goat, which we discussed in the last chapter, which told of a prolonged period of dispersion for his people. He couldn't reconcile that with what he understood from the books. And the books, we mean the writings of Moses and all the prophets. I mean, he at this tender age of 80 plus, he was still reading the books and trying to learn as much as he could about God. So the prophets spoke of 70 years of Babylonian captivity in Jerusalem, in Jeremiah 25:11. I'm gonna go there and read that very quickly. Jeremiah 25:11. Yes, sir.
You remember we talked about how Daniel, if you read it, it's not in chronological sequence. So when we get to 9 here, okay, this first part of 9, which is telling here, it goes back actually to Daniel chapter 6.
Right.
Okay, because in Daniel chapter 6, Darius is mentioned here.
Yes.
So just to kind of put that out there, so as you go and study Daniel on your own, it's not written chronologically. But if you take this chapter 9, this first part of it, you actually stick it over in chapter 6.
Yes.
Okay, but right after chapter 7.
Right.
Great.
So in Jeremiah 25, chapter 25, verse 11, it reads, "This whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. So that's where that prophecy comes from, right? We read about that earlier. Daniel knew that the captivity had began when he was taken captive. Okay, let's go back a little bit. He was taken captive. He and some of his friends and some of the other the God's people was taken captive in 606 BC. Okay, so by 538 BC, when he's talking here, first in this chapter here, 68 of the 70 years that Jeremiah prophesied that they would be in captivity, well, 68 of them years had just gone by, right? So that's why you have to go back and forth and look at the dates, the years that these things happen. So 68 years went by. So he understands that he has 2 years to fulfill Jeremiah's prophecy of 70 years in captivity, right? Also, he saw in Isaiah 44:28. Let's go there for a second. I'm reading out the NASB. It reads, "It is I who says of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he will perform all my desire. And he declares of Jerusalem, she will be built, and of the temple, your foundation will be laid." That prophecy of Isaiah, we go back and if we remember in earlier chapters, Cyrus was the one that's supposed to release them from captivity, right? Return them back to Jerusalem, right? So Daniel knew that the prophet Isaiah prophesied that Cyrus was issued the order for the return of the Jews, and the captivity at this point would end in 2 more years. So like I said, 68 years had already passed at this point. So that kind of confused Daniel. I mean, as you can might see at the time, we're talking about Darius. This is Darius's reign, and 68 years had passed. He knew 70 years was the point in which that they were supposed to go back to their own land. So if you look up there on the statue there, Darius is the second, because Darius was a Mede. Darius is the second kingdom, right? The beginning of the second kingdom. So now in Daniel's previous dreams, he saw 4 kingdoms. And in his mind, he couldn't see that 3 other kingdoms would come and go in 2 years, where the first kingdom had used up almost 68 years of it, of the 70 years, right? So at this point, this is the information that he has. This is what he's thinking. Okay, we got 70 years, 68 years already gone. I see 3 more kingdoms that has to come, right? That's what he's saying. So he couldn't see the 3 other kingdoms that would have to come in that amount of time, in the 2 years that was left. This is what confused them, to later learn that those 70 years was just a type of the longer dispersion that was to last 7 times 70 years long. God thus sent him a vision of 70 weeks. In the meantime, Daniel prayed because he had also read the writings of Moses, Leviticus 26, 40 through 45. Let's go there. Leviticus 26, 40 through 45. And also, if you're writing down Deuteronomy 30th chapter, first verse through the 10th verse. I'm gonna start reading Leviticus. Verse 40 says, if they confess their iniquity and the iniquity of their forefathers, just lost it.
I got it.
Go ahead.
But if they confess their iniquities and the iniquities of their fathers. 271. Of fathers. With their unfaithfulness, in which they were unfaithful to me. And that they also have walked contrary to me. 41. And that I have also walked contrary to them and have brought them into the land of their enemies. If their uncircumcised hearts are humbled and they accept their guilt, then I will return my covenant with Jacob and my covenant with Isaac and my covenant with Abraham. I will remember the land. The land also shall be left empty by them, and it will enjoy its Sabbath while it lies desolate without them. They will accept their guilt because they despised my judgment, and because their souls abhorred my statute. Yet, for all that, when they are in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, nor shall I afford them to utterly destruction, then utterly destroy them, and break my covenant with them, for I am the Lord their God. Verse 45. But for their sake, I will remember the covenant of their ancestors, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt in the sight of the nation, that I might be their God. I am the Lord. Do you need 46?
No, that's okay. And I'm gonna read Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 1 through 10. Now, it's 2 scriptures here that, as we said earlier, Daniel was reading the books, that of Moses and the prophets. So he understood this, he knew this, because Daniel was, reading in the books, trying to learn more about God, and he was really a student of the past readings. So Deuteronomy 30th chapter, verse 1. And this is where the caption is promised. So it shall be when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you call them to mind in all nations where the Lord your God has banished you. And you return to the Lord your God and obey him with all your heart and soul, according to all that I command you today, you and your sons. Then the Lord your God will restore you from captivity and have compassion on you, and will gather you again from all the peoples where the Lord your God has scattered you. If your outcasts are at the ends of the earth, from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there he will bring you back. The Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and he will prosper you and multiply you more than your fathers. I'm not gonna read the rest of it, but you get the idea. So Daniel knows this. Daniel knows what needs to be done for the restoration of his people. Yes.
In Second Chronicles 36, it mentions Jeremiah, and it also mentions the Sabbath, the seventh year that was not observed. And it says that in this 70 years, the land would enjoy all of those Sabbaths that they did not keep. So that was, it's funny how it all works.
Yeah.
Into that.
Yes, as one of the, you can say that was one of the reasons why the land had to rest as well. They weren't keeping those Sabbaths. So it wasn't just a punishment for his people. The land, as you said there, had to rest as well. So what they neglected to do all of those years prior to that, God
Still had to be fixed.
God took them out of the land for 70 years to restore to punish them and restore the land at the same time.
Punish them for disobedience.
Right.
Not observing the statute. And to restore the land, because if he had left them in the land,
They
they
still
would still be in disobedience.
doing the
probably
same, in
continuing
the same
forward.
thing, yes, and not observing the Sabbaths and everything else that they were doing.
If they left them in the land, they probably would have went into a famine because the land would have been healing.
Right.
It's true. So he had, in other words, what sometimes we see as just a curse, it can be God punishing them, but taking care of them. We take like the Garden of Eden, you know, a lot of people say he kicked Adam and Eve out the Garden of Eden as a punishment. But that was really to protect them.
Yeah.
Because the scripture says, if had they not put him out the land, that it got onto the tree and ate and lived forever.
Yeah.
So to protect them from that, they was put out of the garden. You see what I'm saying now? Okay, as a punishment, but yet ultimately that was an act of grace.
Yes,
And
yeah,
so for his nation, people that he wants to preserve, and he left them in the land, and then when the year of this crop,
right,
you know, they went into a famine. So you're talking 10 Sabbaths. They didn't let the land rest. Okay, 10 Sabbaths. So 7 times 10 equals what?
70.
That's how you got 70 years.
If you read between the lines, because the average person just reading it, they wouldn't know that.
There is no 70 years. Why 70? Why not 60?
Right, why not, whatever, you know, God can do what he wants to do, right? He can do it immediately if he wanted to. But again, that was a punishment for his people as
Yeah,
well.
you know, ultimately, God has ordained everything to come to pass. So the capital reason why they went into Babylon was to fulfill prophecy.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, but there's catalysts that happen in life that he have ordained to bring them those prophecies to fulfill.
hmm
So
and I look at it, sometime I kind of look at it like this, you know, yeah. The main thing is to fulfill prophecy, but there's a lot of things that have to happen before that can be done. And to smooth it all out for us here on earth, all this stuff happened, and you know, it just smooths it out in our minds. We can comprehend that the land needed rest.
right.
That they needed to be punished. All these other things.
But ultimately, we see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
God's appointed things and times is happening, you know, in life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
nothing happens without him ordaining it, causing it, or allowing it.
And sometimes, you know, you hear people say all the time, why did this happen? You know, it would have been better if this or that or the other, but they're not looking at the big picture.
Right.
They only see, they got tunnel vision, and they only see what maybe is good for them and not for good for the whole church, say, so to speak. Yeah.
So So Daniel had access to all this information.
All this
Okay. He
writings,
had
the
access
books.
to the writing, he had
Yes.
access to everything. And plus he was a prophet,
Mhm,
God would speak to him,
mhm.
okay? And to go along with what I read earlier with, in concert with Al said, is that he said there, the land shall be left empty by them and will enjoy its Sabbath, you understand that?
Mhm.
While it lies desolate without them.
Mhm.
But he also said that your enemies, you know, you're in the land of their enemies, I will not cast them away, nor shall I abhor them to utterly destroy them. So again, that goes back to him understanding that, hey, this is what we all were talking about right here, is that, you know, the catalyst to get them out there, the disobedience to go in here, but he's also, again, like Ken said, preserving them. Okay? And moving forward.
And just think about it. Think about what the word desolation means. Right?
That's what this.
Usually when a king take over another kingdom, they occupy
Mhm.
that land. They take them captive, but they occupy the land. In this case, the land is destroyed. It's desolate.
Yeah,
So it's
by
nobody
itself.
there. So that goes in line with the 70 years of not being, touched. So, I mean, that struck my mind too. It's a difference here than in several other places in the Bible where, the Medes took over from the Babylonians and the next kingdom and the next kingdom and the next kingdom. Usually it's occupied. But in this case, the land is desolate. Destroyed. So no one's there. So it's being replenished by God. Let me back to Daniel, got off on
Discussion.
yeah. Daniel verse 3 says, from the 19th year of wait a minute, I'm reading yeah, I know.
You skipped a lot of verses.
This thing is not cooperating as advertised.
Verse 3.
Daniel 9 verse 3 says, so I gave my attention to the Lord God to seek him by prayer and supplication with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. When you see sackcloth and ashes, that phrase there, what does it mean in the Bible? Mourning. It's an outward expression of
Humbling of his heart to God.
right service to God, right? So we see that this is a model confession, supplication, and intercession, where Daniel, one of the most spotless characters, and we'll discuss that later too, associates himself as a sinner with his people. And he didn't have to do that, right?
No, he didn't have to, but yes, he had to.
Yeah, he had to, in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
But he didn't have to do that at that particular, I mean, did he have to do that? Because he wasn't a sinner. Part of his humility and the fact that he didn't want, he could have said, your people, those people. He didn't say that. He said we, he said us. And he used that over 20 times in his prayer. Us, we, things like that. He put himself with the sinners, because he is a part of God's people too. So he said we, us.
And it's really, the leaders made the decision not to let the land rest.
Mhm.
And the people just followed, because if the leaders would have said, hey, most likely the people would have followed. So
Mhm.
as a nation, he's speaking as a nation, we have sinned against you.
Right.
So he'll be included in that as a nation. And that's why he speaks like he is.
Yeah.
Because you're right, Daniel was 14 years old. And obviously he wasn't disobeying God, because he would go right in.
Yeah.
And he gets visions and dreams, as a young man. And denies the delicacies of the king. And so he was holding to the law as much as, he knew how.
Mhm.
Matter of fact, willing to die for it,
Yeah.
Lions Den.
Yeah.
So as a nation, Daniel is praying to make a supplication. You know,
But you can see that the selfish person would,
I didn't do it, but they did.
you're right,
Yeah.
those, your people, they,
Yeah.
They did not.
because Daniel was righteous. He was one of the most righteous, in God's eyes. So, I think that there was some weight to that. There was some weight to that later on.
You mean it wasn't like what is the Pharisees and the Republicans in the temple?
Yeah,
One is praying, I've done everything, I'm glad, I'm not like this one over here.
Right.
Okay,
Throwing each other under the bus, so to speak. Look at me. Don't confuse him with me, right? Okay, so also, this was the same year that Daniel was cast into the lion's den. Okay,
Yummy.
yummy, right? And we see that back in chapter 6, right? For praying to his God, and couldn't have been, maybe it was the same prayer, maybe not. That we're talking about here. When he saw the vision of the 70 weeks. As a preparation for the prayer, Daniel fasted and clothed himself in sackcloth and ashes, a token of humility and submission before God. Verse 4. I prayed to the Lord my God and confessed and said, Alas, O Lord, great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant and loving kindness for those who love him and keep his commandments. So we see here that verse 4 begins the actual prayer. And the prayer is in two parts. First, the confession part of the prayer. And then we have the supplication part of the prayer following that, right? So verse 4 begins the confession part of the prayer. O Lord, great and awesome God who keeps his covenant. We have sinned. There he goes again. We have sinned. Verse 5. Committed iniquity, acted wickedly, and rebelled, even turning aside from your commandments and ordinance. Moreover, we have not listened to your servants, the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our princes, our fathers, and all the people of the land. Once again, it rings of Daniel's faithfulness to God, his humility, his you might say, I don't want to say greatness, but because God made him do what he do, right? God is the one gave him that faith. But over and over throughout Daniel, God was with him. God delivered. This wasn't the first time. I mean, God delivered Daniel before, right? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, and it's one point in my head. I will ask the question, what is the duties of a prophet? Okay, and a lot of people say, well, he hears from God and speaks to the people, and that is true, because priests hear from the people, speak to God. Right, Christ is our high priest, he's our mediator.
Right.
So, but the prophet's duty here, look what it says here in 6. Who spoke in your name to the king. Now, so I'm just putting this out there. Somebody say they're a prophet today. Okay, what was the duties of a prophet? They would speak to the people.
To the people and the kings.
The people of nations and
Yeah.
stuff. But the prophet here, he starts out with spoke to the people. No, who spoke in your name to
The
our
kings.
That was one of the prophets' duties, was to speak to the kings. And a lot of times the prophets spoke to the kings when they was in error. or to lead them in the right way,
Mhm.
okay? Okay, David was a king,
Nathaniel.
Nathan was a prophet,
Nathan, yeah.
Right.
David slept with Bathsheba,
Hmm.
Nathan the prophet went to the king.
The one
See,
told him
nobody-
about it,
nobody
yeah.
go to the king,
Yeah,
because the king had your head cut off.
yeah.
But when it came to the prophet, king can touch the prophet. See, so my question would be, if anybody say they're a prophet today, why are you up in the White House? Say, why are you not talking to the leaders? Because he says here, the kings, our prince, our fathers, and all the people of the land.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna carry out the duty of this office that
Prophet,
doesn't
yeah.
exist anymore.
And there's some out there that's
you know,
calling
you
themselves
need to
prophet
be-
too.
You need to be carrying out the duties of a prophet.
Yeah, yeah. Because they wouldn't listen to him.
Right.
I mean, they have no power.
Yeah, that's just a hint for us. If somebody tell you they prophet so and so.
Yeah.
Ask them, what was the duties of a prophet?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And also the priest had special duties as well
Right,
in the kingdom, within the kingdom.
right. Well, he
Yeah.
spoke for the people to God. but
Right.
Again, Christ is our high priest, so we don't,
Yeah,
when people say they're priests, they want to do this of a priest.
yeah.
I just want to point that out here because in the Old Testament, the prophets did more than just foretell the future as God gave it to them. They went to the kings when the king was in error, you know, they did direct the king, which anybody could do.
Yeah.
You know, so, but the kings realized that the prophets was a office that God has ordained, and really, the prophet really had more authority than the king in some sense, and also the priests. Because you remember the King Uzziah tried to go into the temple and do the duties of the priest, and the priest checked him on it.
Yes,
And while he
yes.
was arguing with the priest, God struck him with leprosy. You might be a king, but there's a certain higher calling that, you know, you can't minister to me like a priest.
Yeah.
And so, nobody can minister to the kings like the prophets.
Mhm. And to be sure, there were good kings and there were bad kings, right? So surely the righteous king know what the duties of the prophet is.
Yes.
And the duties of the priest is.
Well,
Now,
and what did David do when Nathan came to him?
oh, he
Psalm 51.
he started acting correctly.
Right, 'cause he knew he was a prophet.
Psalm 51.
Yeah, so I mean, and just
wanted to
as,
point that out.
huh?
Just
Yeah,
want to point that out.
Yeah.
How he lists the kings first.
and also, you know, take King Nebuchadnezzar for example. He wasn't a good king at first. He ended up being a good king, but he wasn't a good king, right? But he still listened to Daniel. Why? Because he's seen time and time again what Daniel, in his mind, most kings will say, your God is less than me. I am God, right? Your God is less
He
than
did
me.
say that at one time.
He did. But what happened?
He too
Over a
crass.
period of time,
Too crass and-
he got schooled, that's what you said? He got humbled real quick. And but yeah, that's how it was back in those days. You know, King had all the power. He had all the power. But like we said earlier, there are a couple people that, you know, the prophets for one, that they had some power too. So verse 7, he says, "O Lord, righteousness belongs to you, but to us open shame. In this day, to the men of Judah and to all of Jerusalem and all of Israel, those near and those that are far off, in all the countries that thou have driven them, because of the trespasses that they have committed against thee." As I'm continuing on in Daniel, I'm thinking to myself, Daniel's working on God here, right? And not everybody can do that, right? But Daniel is favored in heaven. He is beloved in heaven. And, you know, just, yeah, it's amazing, what he was doing here, his prayer. It's not, you know, it wasn't selfish at all. He was pointing out line for line, their trespasses, and he called it our trespasses, not them, but me and them. So verse 8. Open shame belongs to us, O Lord, to our kings, our princes, and our fathers, because we have sinned against you.
That brought at that point in 10, and it says, we're at fault.
Yeah.
The princes were at fault.
Yes.
All those in authority was at fault. But again, he's up to we.
We as a nation,
the
right,
nation.
right. To you belongs compassion and forgiveness, for we have rebelled against you. We have not obeyed the voice of the Lord our God, to walk in his teachings, which he has set before us through his servants and prophets. Yea, all Israel have transgressed your law and turned aside, not obeying your voice. So the curse is poured upon us, along with the oath that is written in the law of Moses, for we have sinned against him. That takes us to the end of 11, I think it is. Okay, so again, Daniel knows about the law of Moses. He had access to that information. He had access to the previous prior prophets, as Pastor BJ said earlier. So he's working he's working with a lot of information, plus he's working with the experience of walking with God, or being with God all those years. From the time he was taken into captivity, and at this point he's 80 plus years old. He's in his late 80s or mid 80s, and so he's no stranger to what God can do, and how much he loves his people, and what he'll do for his people. And that's why I said, and later on you'll see in the next this next part of his prayer, I said to myself, he know how to work. He know how to work. He's working on God, right? Now, not really, but you know, it's one of those things. It's not that he has the gift of gab. It's not that he has any of those things. God made him what he is. But his communion with God and his experience with God allows him to pray in this way. And he's expecting something from God. Just as God expects something from his people. I really think that's, yeah.
Beautiful part about this is, just as we should know scripture and we should pray in accordance with scripture, he knows about God's covenant. He knows about the law of Moses. He knows how sovereign God is. He knows he keeps his promises, his covenant. He carries out his judgments, and he knows he says 70 years. So he's praying in according to what's true and what's right. He's not just putting some abstract stuff out of the sky that doesn't meet with the demands of God's righteousness. You know, so everything he's saying in this prayer, I mean, we talked about the model prayer and that he gave the disciples in Matthew. I mean, this is a prayer here.
Yeah.
You know, and he praying for what he knows is true, you know, about God and about the people, even because he talks about their sins.
And also what struck me was he didn't pray to God and say, take this curse away from us. He didn't ask for that.
Because he knows his judgments are righteous.
And they're going to happen. He knows that. So a lot of times, when you pray, you have to be careful what you're praying for, why you're praying, and how to pray. In one scripture in the Bible, it said, one of the disciples says, teach us how to pray. Because we can say the words.
Yeah, but now when you say be careful what you pray for, I mean, I've heard that a lot of times, what do you mean by that? Be careful what you pray for? Because I know some people say that when they say you might get what you ask for, but
I'm not saying it in that sense. I'm just saying, if you know, like Daniel knew, that prophecy has to be fulfilled, right? Why would you pray that he come take this curse away from us? Why would you do that?
and like I say, he knew the righteousness of God even in judgment. And so he did not disown, the nation's sin.
Right.
And so he was praying in accordance with God, where it had promised, if you disobey, and he says in his prayer, we deserve this.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and ever since we've been going through the book of Judges, we've been talking about obedience.
Mm-hmm.
And here we is in Daniel, it was for their disobedience.
Still talking about
And
it.
Daniel recognized that there was disobedience. And in that, he mentions it in his prayer and basically tells God, you are righteous in your judgment for us being there.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Acts, it says it in his prayer itself in verse 16, but you're talking about, right? It says, "O Lord, according to all your righteousness, I pray, let your anger and your fury be turned away from your city, Jerusalem." He's going to the second part of the prayer. But as you said, he doesn't think anything that God's doing is too hard on the nation itself. He's in total agreement with God and what's happening.
I want to mention something here now. The nation Israel was, okay, the Bible talks about out of one lump of clay. Out of the whole lump, he chooses some people. The nation Israel was just like any other nation. We was all one people. Okay, so out of who God chose, he took those people and made them a nation.
Right.
So he didn't look down and see Israel or Jews. He looked down and saw humanity. And out of humanity, he took a people and made them a nation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was nothing special about any of the people on the land. Everybody was like this one lump of clay that he reached in and made a nation, and then made a covenant with these nations that they would be an example to the rest of the nation, that he didn't make a nation, of the good that could happen in obedience. Okay, so of course, Daniel talks about the shame, that the rest of the nations get to see what's going on with them, because they was God's covenant people, who he made a covenant people, right? Who was just like the other people. He just took them out of this big pot of people and said, okay, you are now my people. Okay, so it was nothing special about them, of course, before this time, but after, they were special because they was God's special people. Right. Who was supposed to be representative to the rest of the nation.
And not only did he, like you said, it was nothing special about them. They weren't better than anybody else. He just chose them.
Right, or because there was more or less, he just chose these people and then set them aside, and they was his people.
And on top of that, he gave them the law.
Well,
He told them how to act, how to live. Yeah, go ahead.
So they were his people because of a promise that was made to Abraham. And in that line, as it went down, that promise still kept continuing. A multitude of people in captivity grew. But that promise was to Abraham. If you hear it, every time he's talking to Israel, he said, because of the promise I made with this person prior to. So it's always something that God has made a covenant. You go back even to the beginning. You see Adam. You see God create man and female, but then he specifically created Adam. He talks specifically about Adam. It's the same way throughout the whole course, all the way to Daniel. There's his people. There's how he deals with his people, the disobedience or the obedience, because we see the split between the kings
And we know that the obedience of Israel led to the captivity and the wickedness of Judah. But he said it won't be there. But all of that was because of David. It was never because of Israel, it was because of David. He tells Solomon, I do this because of David. I did this because of David. It's always a specific covenant that he makes with his people. He made the covenant with the people of Israel, and that's why he mentioned Moses here, because that's who they made a covenant. That's the covenant that they're breaking, the laws that have been given to them, the 613. So that's why Israel is being dealt with, because of their covenant as a whole. It's just the deal that God makes with whoever he chooses to make it with. And that's what we see here. As he said, it's not they're special because of it. It's they're special because God picked them. And if God wouldn't have picked them, if he would have said, I want the Philistines to be my people, and that's the way it'll come through for salvation. We will all be sitting here saying we're Philistines. It's that type of belief that they had in this system, that it was a something made, a covenant made with their fathers. And that's why they speak so heavily of their fathers, because there's so many covenants being made on part of their fathers.
Yeah, I just don't know, but I just don't want to go away with the idea that he picked them because of Jacob.
Right, he says that in here, just because it was more or
Yeah.
less. Yeah, he
Yeah.
made them a nation. is what-
Yeah,
what
he
I'm
made
saying.
them a nation.
He made them a nation. They didn't make themselves a nation.
No. And that was before the foundation of the world. He knew what was going to happen. He knew what he was going to do. So yeah, he promised Abraham.
What I'm saying, the reason why I say that is because if you take that out, then you have to remove every time they say something about their fathers. Even in the New Testament, when they talk about their fathers, that is like such a pivotal point when reviewing the Old Testament and looking forward into the New Testament. You cannot forget the covenants, because that is what Jesus came to say. I'm coming to make a final new covenant. So if you forget that, and if you see, God is always going back to the original thing when he talks about Israel. Remember how I dealt with your fathers and brought them out of Egypt? He's not talking about what he did for the kingdoms. He's still reminding them about what he did for them in Egypt when they cried together as a great nation. You see the nation is divided. We don't see the cry going out. We just see Daniel here, because Israel is still in the state that Israel's in.
So my electronic Bible went. I got the paper copy, so yeah, verse 12, but I ain't gonna be as quick as.
Take care of it. You want me to read it?
I read it, I got it, I can read it. When we go to other passages, I might
The
need.
biggest letters I could find.
Oh, well, it's not my eyesight. It's bad. Verse 12. And he hath confirmed his words, which he spake against us and against our judges that judged us, by bringing upon us a great evil. For under the whole heaven hath been done as hath been done upon Jerusalem. That's a heavy statement right there, right? But I mean, it's true. It's true. But when you think about it, it's like, okay. Of course, Jerusalem knows this, and everybody else knows this. So, that makes it pretty serious, because you're my people. So I expect more from you than I expect from anybody else. You're supposed to be a model to the whole world. You're my people. Okay, as it is written in the law of Moses, all this disaster has come on us, yet we have not sought the favor of the Lord our God. Again, there are places in the Bible where it says, you're a stiff-necked people. He calls them this, he calls them that. You're disobedient, you're hard-headed, you're whatever. After all of that, they still didn't seek his favor by turning away from their sins and understanding his truth. The Lord did not hesitate to bring disaster on us. For the Lord our God is righteous in everything that he does. Yet we have not obeyed him. Remember earlier in the first couple of chapters of Daniel, when we were talking about how hard-headed they were, and I think I mentioned they weren't the smartest people in the world. Because if you see something happening and you see the punishment for it, you would openly do the same thing, right? Or repeatedly do the same thing, or you shouldn't, right? That's what that's all, that was my point, my whole point in saying that. But again, it's here and it happened. And now, O Lord our God, who have brought your people out of the land of Egypt with a mighty hand and have made a name for yourself. See that? Renown. In other words, bringing them out of the land of Egypt supposedly brought God to the forefront, brought God to everybody's mind, right? As it is this day, we have sinned and have done wickedly. So as I said before, there's about 20 plus times that in that part of his prayer that Daniel includes himself in the transgressions of his people, even though he wasn't the one transgressing. But as Ken said earlier, this is a nation and he's praying as a nation, a representative of that nation. And to me, that was pretty awesome. So we go down to verse, that take us down to the end of 15. Verse 16 here, if you notice, verse 16 starts the supplication part of Daniel's prayer. So from 4 to the end of 15, this is the confession. Verse 16 starts the supplication. Remember I said earlier, Daniel's working on that? You might get that same feeling that I got as you read this part of Daniel's prayer. I wrote in my notes, here Daniel is going to appeal to God's righteousness and says, I beseech thee, I beg thee, right? Let your anger and your wrath be turned away from your city, Jerusalem, your holy mountain, because of our sins and for the iniquities of our fathers. Jerusalem and your people, the Jews, have become a reproach. Put that word up, and it means discredit. It's like a slap in the face to the rest of the world he's talking about. This is how you look to the rest of the world, in other words, to all those around us. So their actions and what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're living their life is not a credit to God, right? It's actually a discredit, right? So they should be ashamed. Verse 17, Daniel appeals to God's mercy and compassion. O God, hear the prayer of your servant and his supplications, and cause your face to shine upon your sanctuary for the Lord's sake. This is the part where I'm thinking, wow, you know, Daniel's pretty smart. Not that he's too smart for himself. It's just that, like Ken said, he knows God, he knows promises of God, he knows God's righteousness. So verse 16 and 17, he turns around and he talks about God, your nation, God, your city, God, your people. And that's a complete turnaround from the first part of his prayer. And where he's just talking about us, what we're doing wrong, what we've been doing wrong. Now I want you to save your nation, your city, and so forth and so on, your sanctuary. Oh my God, lend me your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see our desolations and the city which is called by your name. Now I capitalize every time he said your. Once because he's talking about God. And the other thing is he didn't say our. He said your. We are not presenting our supplications before you on account of any merit of our own. Ken touched on that a little bit earlier. Go ahead.
What's the difference between prayer and supplications?
Well, it's all one prayer, but it's just broken down into two parts. The supplication part is he's appealing to God now. He's asking God now. The first part is he's stating, he's admitting, he's not admitting, he didn't have to admit it, but he's talking about what we did wrong, what the nation did wrong, what our fathers did wrong. That's what he covers in the first part of this prayer.
He's acknowledging the disobedience.
Acknowledging the
God is
disobedience.
So verse 16 starts.
It's the turnaround. Yes, go ahead.
To answer your question, prayer and supplication. Prayer is a general term of communication with God encompasses various forms of worship, thanksgiving, confession. Petition can be formal and informal. That's prayer. Supplication, specific types of prayer, emphasizing urgency, humility, earnest request. That's the supplication. Daniel's prayer is very specific. And you know, as you see the prayers in the Bible, they're very specific and very earnest. That's the prayer for them. And the supplication is the earnestness of what needs to happen. If that helps out.
And that's why I pointed out in this part of the prayer, it's your. He's saying to God, this is your nation. This is your sanctuary. This is your city that I want you to save, that I want you to, and this is the reason why I'm praying. So he says, yeah.
No, Eric, I just want to give an example. When Hezekiah went to the Lord
Mhm.
and he asked him, Dennis, for more time. He asked him for more time, but he didn't ask him for more time just to hang out on the earth. Give me more time to be able to serve you.
Yeah.
That's a specific supplication and request of the Lord. It's still a prayer, but the difference is he was asking something specific of the Lord. So
And you-
right, yeah.
And you might say also, in those two differences, he's not asking for something, some forgiveness for something. He asks for more time to serve.
The
To serve.
supplication is the request. The prayer could be, you know, one day, dear Lord, give us rain. There's no specifics, but one day, dear Lord, give us rain so these crops may grow, so that the nation can have food. Supplication, I'm earnestly asking for something specific for them, whether it's David in Psalm 51 praying for the wholeheartedness of forgiveness and not to lose the Holy Spirit. You know, the prayer for rain, Jesus praying for his disciples. So it's a specific earnest ask for help or mercy or something of that nature. That's the supplication.
So Daniel says, we are not presenting our supplications before you on account of any merit of our own, but on account of your great compassion. Again, he knows his God, right? He knows he's compassionate. He knows he's righteous. He knows he's faithful. He knows he's just. He knows all of these things.
Eric, what verse you at right now?
18.
18. Am I on 18 right now? I just finished 18, right?
He just finished 18.
Yeah. Confuse me here in a minute. I got this paper copy up here.
Right.
Verse 19. O Lord, hear, O Lord, forgive, O Lord, hearken and do. Defer not for thine own sake. O my God, for thy city and thy people are called by thy name. And this is the manuscript that I'm reading from. Other versions of it says your. Use the word your. So that's what I mean when I said Daniel's working on God, ain't he? Not literally, but once again, Daniel associates himself with sinning Israel. He does not say the people have sinned, but we have sinned and admitted iniquity and committed iniquity and have rebelled. He doesn't cover up the shameful facts. He says to us belongs confusion and shame. And he confesses that all the evil that has come upon them was because they had broken the law of Moses. His prayer was not based on their righteousness, but upon God's deliverance. And his righteousness, yes. Of Israel from Egyptian bondage. So he used that, he pointed that out to remind God. We don't have to remind him, right? But he says it in his prayer. But upon God's deliverance of Israel from Egyptian bondage. He brings his attention to that. And that the renown of that would be lost if God should now permit them to perish. He's really working on that. I think we saw that somewhere else in scripture where actually when Moses led them out of Egypt.
Right.
That's one of the things that they were saying. Will you bring us out here for? So we can perish? We should have stayed in Egypt. We had food and wine and whatever. It was the glory of the Lord Daniel had in view, not the worthiness of Israel, as he made his supplication to the Lord God. Verse 20, the caption I had for that was Daniel's prayer interrupted as Gabriel brings an answer. So before he even ended his prayer, right, Gabriel appeared with an answer. That's fast. And it was even pointed out that I read Gabriel came all the way from heaven to Babylon, right, to deliver this answer. And it was as if Gabriel was tired, he was weary. What does it say in 20? Let's see. It doesn't say in this. Where it says he was weary. He looked weary, looked tired, as if the angels get tired, you know, or it took it. I mean, it was real fast. He came from all the way from heaven to Babylon real quickly. And that's something that, you know, that's something we have to be aware of and cognizant of, and when we're reading, you know, and discerning what we read. So while Daniel was praying and repenting for himself and his people, and presenting his supplication before the Lord, Gabriel, who he had seen in the vision previously, came to him at about the time of the evening oblation. That's 3 p.m., right? Back in those days, the evening with prayer was 3 p.m. And said to him, Daniel, I am now come forth to give you insight and understanding. At the beginning of your supplication, the commandment came forth, and I have come to show you, because you are greatly beloved. That's pretty awesome right there. An angel telling you you are greatly beloved in heaven. Not everybody can claim that distinction, right? You can?
Yeah. I don't know, Jesus.
Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. So as Daniel is having this vision, you know, it is, he knows where it's coming from. He knows what it is. He just needs clarification. He needs to understand what it is he's seeing. Just as, you know, before where Daniel revealed the vision to the kings before this particular time. I mean, Daniel got his information from God. The king couldn't interpret, but they needed Daniel to show them or interpret their visions. In verse 21, it says, and the rough, wait a minute, am I reading 21? No. I'm reading the wrong chapter here. Verse 21 of chapter 9 says, yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly. See that? Mm-hmm. Touched me about the time of the evening oblation. That's what I was thinking, you know, how we look at angels, how we look at as men, as human beings, how we look at angels. You would say, okay, if I had to go from such and such a place to somewhere else real fast, I might be tired, I might be weary, I might be, you know, worn out. Right. Not the case with angels. Not the case with, you know, and as so we have to understand who we're talking about here. We have to understand the godliness of it all. Anybody else have any input on that particular part?
It's just showing urgency. Answer his prayer and stuff.
And that, as we said earlier, Daniel saw him as being weary, and he didn't have to go all the way from heaven, all the way to Babylon, so he was worn out, you know. But that's how man thinks.
What version of that is that? Do you see here?
King James. No, it don't say weary in King James, does it?
No, it says swiftly.
Swiftly in flight.
Mhm.
Swift flight.
Caused him to fly swiftly.
Yeah, but it said, you say the angel was weary, did it? Daniel was weary, right? Verse 21, right?
Yeah, I'm reading a version now that I didn't have earlier when I wrote my notes. So while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God. Yea, while I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly. That doesn't indicate Daniel was caused to fly swiftly.
Right, that was Gabriel. Just because of swift flight, it doesn't, I don't see anywhere where it insinuate that we have to assume that Gabriel was tired.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, outside of that, I don't have to make a notion of Gabriel's emotion. You know, what Gabriel came to do is the thing that I'm focused on, and I get what you're saying. Some versions may put that in there,
Yeah.
but you know, it's not the focus of.
That's not the point of the
It's not
verse.
the point. And if they put that there, I still want to know, why would they think that Gabriel would be tired?
I don't think that they're saying that in any
No.
verse.
Yeah. But I think what you may be talking about is his first vision where when Daniel first interacted with Gabriel and he was weary afterwards. So that could be it.
Daniel was very.
Daniel.
Daniel was really, yeah.
And I can understand how commentary could, you know, cross that line, maybe not understand it.
I haven't seen it that did that.
I'm just giving it an giving commentary.
So when this is
So-
just showing the urgency on the part of
Yes.
They're wrong.
Let's go to Genesis chapter 18.
Genesis 18.
Chapter 18. And I'm gonna read 1 and 2. Genesis chapter 18, 1 and 2. And the Lord appeared unto him in the plains of Mamre, and he sat at the tent door in the heat of the day. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself toward the ground. Are we talking about men or angels?
Talking about Abraham, right?
We talking about men or
You deal
angels
with
in that,
Abraham.
in that? Say again?
No, it said you were talking about Abraham, what Abraham saw.
Right. So when human beings, you know, see an angel, to him, we see him as a man. We see an angel as a man.
No, I mean, I totally understand it because a non-canonical book, the book of Tobit's son actually travels with with an angel Raphael. So I understand to see him as a man, but Raphael even in there explains to Tobit's son. So I think it was Tobias, might have been, I can't remember the name of it, but he told him, he said, I only appear like this for you, not for me, because for you.
So to humans, angels appear as a man.
Right.
For us.
Like the Lord Jesus, he only appeared as a man, for us.
For
They
us.
found him in the form or fashion of a man,
Exactly.
not a woman.
So
Angels never showed up as one.
I ain't say that.
You say, right.
I didn't say, I didn't go that far. Also, Daniel is told that he is highly esteemed in heaven, right? The word literally means precious. I looked that up.
What word means what?
Highly esteemed in heaven. Esteemed, highly esteemed means precious in this sense right here. Just as Abraham is called the friend of God in James 2:23. If you want to write these down, James 2:23, Abraham is called the friend of God. In John 13:23, John is called the beloved. Also in 19:26, and in 20 verse 2, and in 21 verse 7, and in 21 verse 20.
Really quick, you said in James, you said it was James 2 what?
23,
2:23, and he said that God called Abraham a friend,
the friend of God.
the friend of God. I was just making a correlation between what Jesus actually said as well. Calling him my friend.
Mhm.
I'm no longer calling him, it's servant.
In Daniel 9:23 verse, Daniel is called highly esteemed. Daniel's in pretty good company, from what I could see. We're gonna close with that tonight, and we'll begin next week with the 70 weeks.